The dark truth about Singin' in the Rain is finally known after 70 years. The best-known show from MGM was based on stolen songs, injuries that were not reported, and brutal abuse. Debbie Reynolds, who was 19 years old, ran screaming after Gene Kelly kissed her so hard. Donald O'Connor almost died while making the movie make them laugh. Not only that, but the company also hid proof of racism, censorship, and a scandal that would have ended Hollywood's golden age. The pictures they try to hide have finally come to light today. Music in the Rain wasn't made by MGM because it had a great story. Because Arthur Freed needed to make money off of old songs that no one cared about, they made it. Before he became a producer, Freed wrote lyrics. In 1929, he co-wrote the song Singin' in the Rain with Nazi Herb Brown, who composed it. Over the years, they had written more than 100 songs for MGM shows. However, most of them were stuck in old movies that no one liked. By 1951, MGM's musical section wasn't making as much money as it used to. Freed thought a way to make that right. Use those old songs in a movie that you have to make. They could use the music they already had instead of buying new songs. Before anyone else did, Freed pretty much came up with the idea for the jukebox musical. Few of the songs in the movie were written just for it. Make 'Em Laugh was an exact copy of Cole Porter's 1948 song Be a Clown. Even the director, Stanley Donen, said it was so clear that it was all copied from other sources. You couldn't sue Freed, though, because he was strong enough. He couldn't even trust the songs from his own back collection. Fit as a Fiddle was dug up from obscurity and used again without giving thanks to the people who wrote it with other people. The movie cost MGM $2.54 million, which is about $30 million today. They didn't just throw money around, though. To save money, they used wardrobe and props from an American in Paris. In 1970, MGM hid 8.5 tons of old fried brown sheet music under a Los Angeles golf course, so they wouldn't have to pay taxes on them. Freed's author later said that Singin' in the Rain was really just a tax break that looked like art. The movie was supposed to be made in a totally different way at first. Howard Keel, who was one of MGM's biggest stars at the time, was written the lead part of Don Lockwood. Back then, the story was about a Western star who had a hard time when movies started using sound. The story was great for Keel, but he didn't agree with Freed about it and asked for more cash. Freed said no and fired him. That's when Gene Kelly showed up. But there was something wrong. Kelly wasn't a Western star. He danced. Everything had to be thrown out, and the writing had to be changed to fit him. He stopped being a cowboy and turned into a song and dance man. They also added a lot more humor because Kelly was so good at it. After that, there was Cosmo Brown. Comden and Green wrote the part for Oscar Levant, a friend who is a pianist and actress and is known for being sarcastic and funny. But Kelly didn't like him. In place of her, he wanted Donald O'Connor. The part was already taken when Levant showed up for practice in September 1950. He hadn't even been told. Then he left the set angry and called Kelly a control freak who had the charm of a tax collector. It was a lot worse for Debbie Reynolds. Gene didn't even want her in the movie because she was 19 and had never danced before. The head of MGM didn't listen to him and cast her anyway. That meant she had to make it through Kelly's rough practices. She worked out every day for 3 months, sometimes for 14 hours a day. She danced so hard during the Good Morning song that her feet were bleeding through her tap shoes. She cried a lot in between takes, but Kelly kept telling her to do it again. When it was time to film their first kiss in March 1951, things got worse. It wasn't just a kiss. Kelly kissed her hard and sneaked his tongue in without notice. Reynolds was scared to death. She called it an attack in her 2013 book, Unsinkable, and said she ran around screaming for Coca-Cola to wash her mouth. Studio records show that after that, she asked for all love scenes to take place on a closed set. After many years, Kelly said, "I wasn't nice to Debbie. I'm surprised she still talks to me." It was clear that power was not balanced. Reynolds only made $300 a week, but Kelly made $12,000. The whole thing left deep wounds. When asked about it in 1996, Reynolds said that singing in the rain and giving birth were the 2 hardest things she had ever done. She was saved by Fred Astaire. He found her crying under a piano one day and took her away. He showed her how to deal with stress. He told her, "You're not going to die. There's something wrong if you're not sweating." The company still didn't trust her voice after all that work. Betty Noyes was brought in to record her singing in 2 songs. What's the joke? The whole story of her character was about dubbing someone else. She said years later that she didn't know how mean Hollywood could be. The shoes she wore in Singin' in the Rain that were stained with blood are still in a museum. It's possible that Donald O'Connor's pain was worse. He almost died in his most famous scene from Singin' in the Rain. He made Make Em laugh when he was only 27 years old. The number was full of flips, falls, and stunts that were too hard for his body. 4 packs a day, O'Connor smoked a lot, and his lungs were already weak. He threw himself 45 times over the course of 2 days. It flipped over on a hard concrete floor after running up walls. In vaudeville, he did a move where he ran up a wall and flipped backwards. It was the most risky move he could do, but now it was really tough. His body wasn't the same. He had bruises on his feet and legs after the first take. He threw up because he was so tired. Then the worst thing took place. The video was bad because of a problem with the camera. The next day, he had to do the whole thing all over again. When the movie was over, O'Connor passed out. He was taken to the hospital and was nearly dead. Some say he stayed for 3 days. Some say a whole week. He was tired, had trouble breathing, and got burned on the rough carpet. MGM tried to play down how violent the scene really was by saying it was because he was smoking. But his co-star Rita Moreno later told the truth. He also had broken ribs. Even so, Gene Kelly told O'Connor they needed more takes when he finally got back to the set. Years later, O'Connor laughed about it and said, "I thought I'd have to kill myself to get to the end." That scene was full of real pain, which is why it's still one of the most memorable in Hollywood history. Is pure Hollywood irony. She played the silent movie star Lena Lamont, whose voice was so bad that it had to be dubbed. But Hagen had a beautiful, well-trained voice in real life. At the end of the movie, when Lena is caught lip-syncing, it's not Debbie Reynolds' voice that comes out of her mouth. Hagen's real sound is there, but no one can see it. It gets stranger still. Studios thought Hagen's voice was too good for Reynolds to pass off as Lena's because she was recording Reynolds' singing. There were layers on top of layers. Hagen didn't like shows, but she knew how to handle herself. She got Lena's voice from Judy Holliday's role in Born to Run. Yesterday, I screamed my way to the part and was a shining star at her tryout. She was great at being funny. She even got nominated for an Oscar, but Kelly wasn't happy. He believed she took too many scenes from him. She didn't work as much after Singing in the Rain, but that role is still one of the best jokes Hollywood has ever pulled. He did more than just sing in Singing in the Rain. He was in charge. He helped direct and arrange the movie and made sure it was true to his vision. He wanted Don Lockwood to feel like a real guy, one who was fit, friendly, and quick on his feet. The well-known scene where they sing in the rain, that was all him. They didn't want to use real water for the shoot, but Kelly wouldn't give up. 3 rough days in July 1951 were used to film the scene. Kelly had a fever of 103 degrees, but he wouldn't stop. He was wet all day because he had to stand under lines that pumped water from above. His wool suit got too small for him, so the costume makers had to stretch it out between takes. That didn't matter, though. He had to do it right. It was terrible on set. Culver City ran out of water because MGM was using so much of it. That's why they had to shoot early in the morning before people watered their lawns. Kelly wasn't taking a break between takes. He was lying down under very hot lights, hoping to get rid of his heat. So even though it was wet, he did dangerous things like jumping on a pillar and tap dancing through deep puddles. The well-known umbrella spin? That wasn't supposed to happen. In fact, the handle broke in the middle of the scene, which almost ruined the take. Having cameras around made things worse. To get the rain to show up on film, the team had to flood the stage with hundreds of lights because they were so big and couldn't handle low light. It was too hot to stand. John Hagen passed out more than once. Donald O'Connor had heat rashes all over his body because his wool suit kept sweat in. Props melted and glass broke. And every day the team had to put together new sets from scratch. It cost a lot of money just for the Broadway music sequence. The bright lights tore holes in the fake buildings. Because the cameras were too big to move, dance numbers could only be filmed in wide shots and not close-ups. The Technicolor method was a nightmare from start to finish. When the movie was over, they saw that Debbie Reynolds' dress had been filmed in the wrong color. Fixing that mistake took weeks and weeks of extra work. On the set, there was also a stuntman called Russ Saunders. Things were already dangerous, but he made them even more so. He was a dancer and diver who won a lot of awards. O'Connor and Kelly hired him to do their most dangerous moves. But the stars had to do their own acts because of one accident after another. As part of the fit as a fiddle number, Saunders had to jump from a moving trolley to a stage. He did not do the math right and broke his leg. O'Connor had no choice but to do it himself. He got it right the first time. Saunders was hurt over and over. He meant to lift Sid Charisse during practice for the Broadway melody sequence, but he dropped her instead. It was Gene Kelly's turn to help. A lot of simple things went wrong. With just one slip and fall, Saunders broke his wrist, and O'Connor had to come up with something else. By the end of shooting, Saunders had hurt himself 6 times very badly. Kelly and O'Connor did most of their own moves in the end. After the fact, director Stanley Donen joked that they should have just used Saunders as a crash test dummy and gotten insurance on him. Sid Charisse almost had a bad thing happen to her. She danced in the Broadway melody ballet with a 50-foot long silk scarf that flowed around her neck. For a beautiful float, the team used 4 huge engines from bombers from World War II. The engines made a lot of wind, which made the scarf 15 pounds heavy and very hard to control. It kept getting caught on the lights, which messed up take after take. After that, something scary happened. Charisse's scarf was around her neck. The engines kept pulling, which made the fabric tighter. She was having trouble breathing. Before she got hurt badly, crew members had to rush in and cut her free. Things got worse after that. The whole scarf thing was a mess. The cloth had to be made just for MGM, which cost $12,000. That's about $140,000 today. 2 crew members were hurt when roof tiles fell on them because of the strong wind from the engines. During one take, Charisse dislocated her shoulder while fighting the pull of the scarf. She was still healing from giving birth. She said, "I felt like a kite in a hurricane." Afterward, something else was wrong even when they finally got a good take. The scarf fell at one point, revealing Charisse's midriff by mistake. The scene was almost cut because it was inappropriate. To hide the moment, the editors spliced frames together quickly to fix it. There is a strange jump in the video at 1.22.3 in the end movie that you can see if you pay close attention. They had to fix it up there. The scene with the Broadway melody ballet and the vamp dance with Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse had the most editing issues in Singin' in the Rain. The point of this scene was to show a romantic moment between Kelly's dancer character and Charisse's mystery woman with ties to the mob. The Catholic Legion of Decency and the Production Code Administration, PCA, on the other hand, stepped in during the tryouts that a move where Charisse wrapped her legs around Kelly's waist caused trouble. It was deemed extremely sensual and inappropriate by them. Led by Joseph Breen, the PCA said it broke the code's rule against suggestive poses that could bring out the lowest and baser parts of a person. Today, no one knows for sure which shot was cut, but there is a strange jump cut at 1.22.3 in the whole movie. At that very moment, Charisse goes from being wrapped around Kelly to standing a few feet away. There's also a skip in the music. This took place because MGM had to film the scene again on July 23, 1951. Because the cutout showed too much of her thigh, it cost $12,500, which is about $145,000 today. Designer Walter Plunkett had to add padding to hide it. It was meant to show the dark and attractive side of Hollywood, but the changes made to the scene took away most of what it meant. Charisse did not become a strong symbol of evil. Instead, she became a part of the story. It's funny how this censorship, like Lena Lamont's voice, mirrored the film's own message. Gene Kelly's artistic vision was also shaped by outside forces in order to make her more accepted. There was a risk that the directors would face even more censorship if they talked about this in public. The main joke in the movie was about how Debbie Reynolds' character, Kathy Selden, secretly did Gene Hagen's character, Lena Lamont's voice. There was another part to this, though, that no one saw. Reynolds was voiced by a singer named Betty Noyes. They told Reynolds singing wasn't strong enough for the songs Would You and You Are My Lucky Star in April 1952. She didn't record the songs because Lenny Hayton, the musical director, thought her voice was too high-pitched. On April 12, 1952, she did it 3 times and got $750 for it, which was more than Reynolds' $300 a week pay. MGM tried to hide this. Reynolds' voice wasn't used at all in the scene where Kathy records Lena's lines. Instead, Gene Hagen did it herself for the movie. Donen, the director, said that Reynolds' voice had a bad Midwestern twang and Hagen's voice was more refined, like a starlet from the 1920s should sound. This made things strange because Hagen was dubbing Reynolds, who was then voicing Hagen's character. MGM didn't say anything about this until 1975 because they were afraid it would weaken the film's smart plot. But That's Entertainment 3 came out in 1994 with a scene of Reynolds singing "You Are My Lucky Star" that had been cut out. When I heard her real voice, it was a lot lighter and softer than Noises. Reynolds later said she was angry about it. She wrote, "I felt cheated" in her autobiography from 1988. But it got me the Oscars. Noise, who died in 1987, wasn't given credit for the movie until it came out on DVD in 2002. It was a lot darker at the beginning of Singin' in the Rain. When the story was first being written, Don Lockwood's career was over after the dubbing scandal. He gets drunk in a movie theater in 1932, watching his old silent movies and muttering, "Nobody wants fakes, not even me." This was based on real players like John Gilbert, whose career ended when talkies made his high voice obvious. People didn't like this ending when MGM showed the movie to test groups in March 1952. They didn't want to watch a sad movie because they had already been through the Great Depression. On a note card, someone wrote, "We went through the Depression. We don't need more sadness." MGM heard what was said and res-hot the ending in May 1952. Adding the well-known billboard scene cost $48,000 to shoot, but a small part of the original finish was kept. For the dueling Cavaliers showing, a 30-second shot of Don staring at a flickering projector was used instead. Rita Moreno also had a rough time on set. She played the small part of Zelda Zanders in a movie that she shot in just 9 days in April 1951. She had a solo song called "I Got a Feeling You're Foolin'" that made fun of how Hollywood treats its own stars. She practiced for 3 weeks, but the time was cut down to make things go more quickly. A practice tape from 1994 that got out shows Moreno making up a flamenco-inspired routine on the spot, but Kelly turned it down because it was too ethnic. She was very sad. "I cried for days." She later said, "They made me into a gossipy cameo." She already had to deal with racism in Hollywood. And it got worse. Reynolds made $300 a week, but she made $750 a week. However, MGM publicity shots often cut her out. In her 2021 autobiography, Rita Moreno, she wrote that Kelly made fun of her Puerto Rican accent on set by telling her to stick to dancing. Rosita. For many years, the company hid her work. She finally got back the scenes that were cut out in 2016 at a private Academy screening. It's scary how hard this movie was on the stars. After many years, Reynolds made a joke that making Singin' in the Rain was just as painful as giving birth. That being said, it wasn't just tired. She got hurt, and the pain would follow her for the rest of her life. Doctors told her that if she kept going, her career could end right there because her feet hurt all the time and blood vessels burst. There was no care from the company. They hid it and made her come back to work the next day. Kelly even said it was a miracle she still talked to him because he was so mean to her. Reynolds kept going and became a Hollywood legend, but her feet never got better. It was a great example of how the business treats young stars. They had to go through pain to get what they wanted. Gene Kelly had a lot going on in his personal life as well as in his work life. Betsy Blair was only 17 years old when they got married in 1941, and their lives seemed great for a while. She thought he was just a waiter when she met him at an interview. But things started to go wrong as Kelly's career took off. When Blair was making Singin' in the Rain, he got caught up in Hollywood's fear of politics. She thought in a left-wing way. At the time, that was risky. Louis B. Mayer, Kelly's boss at MGM, told him that he would be fired if he couldn't get her to renounce communism. She said no. Their marriage couldn't handle the stress. After the fact, Blair said that Kelly wanted her to stay the pure girl he married, but she was changing. They broke up in 1954 and got a divorce in 1957. After that, she moved to Europe and married again. Kelly, on the other hand, never really got over his anger. He started seeing Jean Coyne, who would become his wife, while his marriage was going apart. Jean had been working with him as an assistant choreographer on Singin' in the Rain. It hurt just as much for Donald O'Connor to work on Singin' in the Rain, but in a different way. Making people laugh with his big solo number was amazing. He jumped off of walls, did pratfalls, and threw himself around like he had no bones. But it almost killed him. He smoked 4 packs every day. After many years, the harm caught up with him. He was taking nitroglycerin pills to keep his energy up by the 1970s. In 1971, he had a heart attack. His health had gotten worse and worse by the late 1970s. His lungs were bad because he smoked, and drinking made them worse. We lost him in 2003 when he was 78 years old. After he died, his daughter said that his last words were a joke. He wished he could thank the Academy for the award for lifetime achievement that he never got. He had given one of the best performances in Hollywood history. But the price he paid was his body, his health, and finally his life. Warner Brothers restored Singin' in the Rain in 4K Ultra HD for the film's 70th anniversary in 2022, and it showed some surprising new details. The original Technicolor negatives and old prints were used for the repair, which brought back details that had been lost for many years. A big find was 17 frames that were lost from the scene with Gene Kelly and Sid Sheraz in the Broadway Melody Ballet. Fans had long thought that something was missing, and now they know for sure. The lost frames showed Charisse's leg slipping during a tricky lift, but the directors cut away from the scene to hide it. During the famous Singing in the Rain scene, the 4K picture also showed small drops of sweat on Kelly's face. This fact showed how sick he was at the time. Even though he had a fever of 103 degrees, he kept moving. Another shocking discovery was a scene from the 1952 release that had been cut out. The Catholic Legion of Decency took out a 23-second part of the vamp dance where Charisse wraps her leg around Kelly's waist because they thought it was too sexy. The original footage was found in an old nitrate print that was kept at UCLA. It was then added to the 4K version. When the painting was fixed up, a long-held story about the rain scene was busted. Many people think that milk was added to the water to make the rain stand out more, but Technicolor records showed that it was done to make the rain reflect studio lights better. Older repairs that had mistakes were fixed by the new high-resolution scan as well. In earlier copies, skin tones were too saturated because the magenta dye in the 1970s prints had faded. It looked like the colors were more real. Kelly's scar on her face was a shocking detail because it had always been airbrushed out of DVD releases. For the first time, it was clear in the new copy. Then in 2023, a bunch of very rare Singing in the Rain items showed up as NFTs, which caused a big scandal. 47 things were bought and sold on OpenSea. Collectors are shocked. When Debbie Reynolds wore her bloody tap shoes to film Good Morning, they were one of the most talked about items. The size 6B shoes were sold for $12.5 Ethereum, which is around $23,000. Records from the hospital showed that Reynolds' feet bled for 3 days after shooting the grueling routine. Another thing was Gene Kelly's fever chart from April 15, 1951, which showed that he had a temperature of 103.8 degrees Fahrenheit while shooting Singin' number. His nurse notes even showed that he threw up between takes, and doctors at MGM had to give him adrenaline shots to keep going. There were also edited script pages in the NFT collection that showed scenes that were taken out because they were too controversial. In a scene that was cut, Lena brought attention to the unfair pay gap between men and women. She was going to say that actors made $750 a week and Kelly was making $5,000. One of the most upsetting discoveries was a set of 35mm frames that had never been seen before that showed racial segregation. During the Beautiful Girl number, one shocking photo showed that black backup dancers were separated from white performers. These dancers were not recognized and were only paid $3 a day. Warner Brothers tried to stop the NFTs from being sold by saying they were in violation of their copyright. The files spread too quickly to be taken down, though, since they were on the Ethereum blockchain. Debbie Reynolds told Turner Classic Movies about Singing in the Rain in her last interview, which took place in December 2016, just a few days before she died of a stroke. She said, "I'll never do that again, but I'm proud that we made history." This wasn't just about the movie, it was also about how much it hurt her. She got arthritis after making the movie and had to have 2 hip implants, one in 1985 and one in 1999. In 2001, she said that she had kept Valium in her gloves during the You Were Meant for Me number to help her deal with Kelly's mean behavior. She fought to keep the movie alive, even though shooting had been hard. In 2012, she gave $500,000 to help fix up the movie, and she made the Blu-ray commentary just a few weeks before she died. The last words she said to her daughter Carrie Fisher broke my heart. "I want to be with Carrie," she said. Later, medical reports showed that she died of broken heart syndrome, the rare situation that comes from being very sad. It was a sad finish that was kind of like Singing in the Rain. Reynolds' voice and strength have worn down over the years, just like Kathy Selden's voice was taken away in the movie.